Assen always finds a way to create stories, and this year's Dutch Grand Prix did not disappoint. From a hard contact at the final chicane to a rider who could no longer feel his own brake lever. There is something special about the final chicane at Assen. It is a corner that has produced moments talked about for years in MotoGP history. In 2015, Marc Marquez shoved into Valentino Rossi's Yamaha at that exact same spot, sparking an incident that shook the racing world for months. A decade later, at the very same location, Marquez found himself at the center of a similar drama once again, only this time not as the attacker, but as the one being attacked. This year's Dutch Grand Prix delivered a race full of tension. Marc Marquez, the reigning champion, chose the soft rear tire when almost every other top contender opted for the more durable medium. It was not an arbitrary call. His physical condition, not yet fully recovered, meant he could not extract the maximum potential from a tire across every corner of all 26 laps. A push single-lap strategy became his approach, and the soft rear suited that style of riding far better. But that strategy carried consequences. With the tire degrading faster, Marquez had to defend fourth place from riders hunting him down in the closing stages. One of them was Fabio Di Giannantonio of the VR46 team, an Italian rider growing more dangerous with every race and not willing to give an inch to anyone. With 6 laps remaining, Fabio Di Giannantonio launched his attack on the fourth place held by Marquez. At the exit of the final chicane, that same historic stretch of tarmac, DiGi dived from the inside. The two bikes met at the apex, and the contact forced Marquez wide and into the gravel trap. Di Giannantonio did not escape the moment without consequence either. His bike also crossed the white track limits line as he exited onto the start-finish straight. Marquez lost momentum, and his fourth place vanished in an instant. He dropped all the way to 6th, passed by Alex Marquez, his own younger brother riding for the Gresini team, who capitalized on the chaos to move through. Race direction decided to penalize Di Giannantonio, not for the contact with Marquez, but for failing to surrender the advantage he had gained by cutting the chicane. A long lap penalty was handed to the VR46 rider, temporarily dropping him to 6th. But the punishment did not change much by the end of the race. Di Giannantonio fought hard, passed both Marquez brothers, and reclaimed the fourth place that had been at the heart of the incident. A complete recovery, even if the route to get there was anything but clean. Marquez knew he did not have much ammunition for a lengthy protest. Race direction had spoken. The contact between the two was a racing incident. No penalty for the touch itself. And Marquez, in his characteristic way, chose to respond with a cool head and a touch of dry humor. It was a racing incident, that is what race direction said, because he was not penalized for the contact but for cutting the chicane, Marquez said after the race. So we accept the decision. It was a racing incident, and that is it. I accept it. Keep quiet and race, that is all. When journalists reminded him of the parallels between this incident and the famous 2015 clash with Valentino Rossi, Marquez smiled and delivered a line that immediately made the rounds. At least in 2015, I made the chicane. The humor carried a bitter truth. In 2015, Marquez, then riding for Honda, did make an aggressive move at the very same corner against Rossi. The difference was that he completed the turn. Rossi cut through the gravel and went on to win, while Marquez finished second. Now, almost symbolically, the roles were reversed. It was Marquez who ended up in the gravel, and his attacker, DiGi, who held his ground. The story did not end at the chicane. After the incident with Di Giannantonio, Marquez crossed the finish line in 6th, but fate was not done with him. He received a one-position penalty for also running off the track on the final lap. His final result, 7th, right behind Enea Bastianini of the Tech 3 team. This was a long way from the standards expected of a reigning champion. In the two previous rounds at Balaton Park and Brno, Marquez had been dominant, taking back-to-back victories, but Assen was a different story. He finished 10 seconds behind race winner Ogura, with very little he could do about it. Yet Marquez had known since the start of the weekend that Assen was not a place for him to shine this time around. He had even set himself a target far lower than his usual ambitions, simply survive the weekend and come home in one piece. I went out, and I knew that my place was finishing 6th, 7th, and 8th, he said plainly. It is true that looking at the race, the maximum was 5th place, but in the end we finished 7th. The good thing is that we escaped from Holland without injuries, so this was my main target. For anyone else, that kind of statement might sound like defeat. For Marquez, it was honesty. Assen, with its high-speed corners and rapid direction changes, genuinely punished him. The left-hand turns leading into right-hand braking zones were where he struggled most, and that was precisely where his competitors kept striking. Assen has very high-speed corners, but I am struggling a lot from the change of direction from the left corner to the right one, especially if I need to change from the left and arrive at a brake point on the right side. That is where I am struggling more, and today that is where people attack me, he admitted openly. One of the more telling details from Marquez's race at Assen was his decision to run the soft rear tire, the only rider among the frontrunners to do so. The majority went with the medium compound, more consistent and better suited to the full race distance. Marquez made the call almost at the last moment before lights out. The reason had nothing to do with aggression or tactical boldness. It was the opposite. His physical condition meant he simply could not extract peak performance from the tire on every lap. With the soft, he could ride at a steadier pace and pick his moments to push on selected laps only. I do not have the physical condition to take the maximum potential of the tire on every lap. So I said I will ride the bike slowly and just push single laps, and to push single laps the soft rear was better, he explained. It was a rare admission from a world champion who usually speaks in the language of dominance. But this is Marquez now, a rider mature enough to recognize his own limits and adapt to them, rather than forcing the issue and ending up on the ground. While Marquez wrestled with physical constraints that remained largely hidden from view, his fellow Spaniard Pedro Acosta was dealing with a problem far more raw and immediate. Acosta started the race from 8th on the grid, already far from an ideal position, and it was not simply a matter of pace. Throughout Saturday, 2 sensor-related technical issues had disrupted his preparation, limiting his time on track and leaving him stranded in a grid slot lower than he deserved. Even so, Acosta threw himself into the race with full commitment. He worked his way forward from 8th, dueling with Marquez in a fight for the top 5. To those watching, it looked like an entertaining battle between 2 Spaniards with very different styles. What nobody could see was what Acosta was actually experiencing inside his glove. As early as the 3rd lap of Saturday's sprint race, his hand had already begun causing him trouble. By the main race on Sunday, the situation had deteriorated sharply. On lap 13 of 26, Acosta slowed heading into turn 1 and eventually pulled into the pits to retire. Television cameras caught a striking image. Acosta, after climbing off his bike, violently shaking his right hand. His expression said everything that words did not need to. After the race, Acosta finally disclosed the condition that had been haunting him: carpal tunnel syndrome. It is caused by compression of the median nerve in the wrist, a nerve that runs through a narrow passage in the palm and controls sensation and movement in the fingers. When that nerve is compressed, the wrist goes numb. In the context of motorcycle racing at speeds approaching 300 kilometers per hour, losing the feeling in your brake hand is not an inconvenience. It is a genuine danger. Behind Marquez, sometimes I had to just release the brake to not hit him because I did not even know if I had the lever in my hand, Acosta said. It is a chilling sentence to sit with, a MotoGP rider unable to confirm whether his fingers were still gripping his brake lever. Acosta revealed that the condition had been with him since 2025, though it had only now reached a point where it could no longer be managed. In fact, a previously unexplained moment suddenly made sense. At Motegi the previous year, he ran wide into the gravel at turn 1, something many put down to a simple riding error. He now knew the real cause. His wrist had lost all feeling at exactly the wrong moment. 1 year ago, if you remember last year in Motegi, I went wide in the gravel at turn 1. This was because I arrived at one moment where I have no more feeling, and I just lost the lever from the finger, he explained. The original plan had been to schedule surgery after the summer break, slotting it in between the Sachsenring round and the mid-season rest period. But what happened in Assen changed everything. What he experienced in that race was the worst episode he had ever endured, and waiting was no longer a sensible option. Today, maybe it was the worst case that I ever had. Our idea was to take surgery after Sachsenring, but it is better that we do it now, he said, with the kind of directness that left no room for doubt. Surgery was scheduled for Tuesday, just 2 days after the Assen race. The next goal, be ready for the German Grand Prix at Sachsenring on July 5th. Acosta closed the Assen weekend with a single championship point across both races, a painful return for a rider of his potential. Technical failures on Saturday, a physical crisis on Sunday, the combination made for a weekend he had every reason to want to forget entirely. When journalists asked whether there was anything positive to draw from the weekend, Acosta kept it short and completely honest. Nothing. Between the technical issues that we have on Saturday and then this thing of the hand, it is better to forget. The candor of a young rider who, even in frustration, did not reach for diplomatic padding or search for silver linings that were not there. Assen was bad. He knew it. He said so. The 2026 Dutch Grand Prix leaves behind two large, intertwined stories, Marquez surviving on willpower and tactical intelligence despite his physical limitations, only to end up at the center of a chicane incident that instantly recalled the most famous crash of his career, and Acosta pushing through a race with a hand he could barely feel, before finally accepting that his body had reached its limit and that a surgeon's table could not wait any longer. Both are different portraits of what it means to be a warrior in MotoGP. Not just speed on the track, but the way a rider grapples with his own limits, pushes to the very edge, and then makes the call that only experience and self-awareness can produce. Marquez goes home in seventh, body intact, and with one memorable line that will be repeated for years. Acosta goes home with 1 point, a surgery appointment, and the hope that his right hand will be ready before Sachsenring. The Assen circuit, with its chicane that has consumed so much drama across so many decades, closes another chapter in its long history. The season is far from over, and the real fight has only just begun.